Welcome back, MTG Joe here. Today we're going to be covering the top 3 Mythic standard decks in terms of win rate percentages going into the weekend. So if you want to try to level up, especially with it being towards the end of the February season, I'm going to start trying to introduce this every Friday going into the weekend when people have a little bit more time, looking at kind of the top Mythic decks in terms of win rates that people can try out. So we do cover the full spread of like top performing standard decks, look at everything really above 55% win rate. For standard best of 1, best of 3. We also look at explore and historic content on the channel. So if you like that type of content, definitely check it out. It's in the playlist. We come out with new videos every week. And we get the data like you see on the screen from UntapGG, companion tool that runs alongside Arena Client. Got win rate tracking, like deck collections, whole bunch of useful features. Link is in the video description, but I'll copy and paste all these deck lists for you so you can give it a shot. So we are looking just Mythic from February 17th through the 24th. So the last 7 days, these are the top performing Mythic decks. And the top deck is Gruel Agro. So kind of a Gruel modified, Gruel Agro, a deck that we haven't really seen much. We've seen mono red, but green cards in standard apparently are no longer illegal to play. And this deck is using kind of a modified sub-theme. So in the 1-drop slot, you have Ascendant Pack Leader. It's a 1-mana 2/1 that gets bigger when you play 4 drops. In this deck, really the only 4-drop you have is Thundering Raiju. So not like the biggest top-end creature, but it's a 1-mana 2/1 that can get bigger over time. You have Evolving Adaptive, which is kind of the experimental, or like Ooze, Experiment 1, or Pelt Collector kind of effect. So 1 mana, it enters with an oil counter, and then it gets a 1/1 counter whenever a creature with power or toughness higher than it enters the battlefield. So it gets bigger as you play more creatures. And just a single oil counter on it does count as it being modified. For your effects like Kami's Flare, which deals like additional damage if you do have a modified creature. So worth noting there. Kumano Faces Coxswain, pings, pumps to give it modified, makes your creatures bigger, and then is a 2/2 that exiles when like your opponent's creatures die. You have Tyvar's Stand, which is a protection spell for 1 mana that can also pump in extra damage to kind of surprise kill your opponent if you flood. You have Hajar Loyal Bodyguard. On its base stats, it's a 2-mana 3/3. In this particular deck, the only legendaries you have are Miglos as well as Squee, which we'll cover. So it's not like super relevant, its additional text, but in a pinch, you can protect some of your legendary creatures as well as give them extra damage. But just on its own, 2-mana 3/3 is a pretty good rate, all things considered. Kami's Flare and Lightning Strike make up your removal or burn package. The Kami's Flare can only be pointed at creatures or planeswalkers, but if you have a modified creature, which pretty much all your creatures can be modified in some manner, it allows you to deal 2 damage to their face as well. So it's a good way to kind of deal with their creature and then have additional reach on top of that. You have Quirion Beastcaller, which another creature similar to the Evolving Adaptive that rewards you for playing further creatures beyond that. And then when it dies, you can redistribute those counters amongst your other creatures. Miglos is another new card. This is seen play in Pioneer as well in the red-green vehicles deck. 3-mana 4/4, so again, an above average in terms of base stats. Enters with 5 oil counters, which happens to make it modified. And then you can remove its oil counters with certain mana conditions to give it like various types of evasions, pumps, or destroy artifacts or enchantments. Squeeze lets you go wide, and then Thundering Raiju lets you put counters when you attack and then deal incidental damage based on the number of modified creatures you have. The mana base got a big improvement with Copperline Gorge. You have 8 early duels that can come into play untapped with your Rock Veils, and then some utility lands there. The next winningest deck, and it's actually kind of surpassed. So again, it kind of bunch like both Soldiers decks are pretty good. This week, for whatever reason, the last couple days, Mono White has been doing a little bit better, but it does kind of go back and forth in between the two, the Blue White and then the Mono White versions of the deck. The payoff to being Mono White is you get Lay Down Arms as a 1-mana removal spell that scales and lets you deal additional kind of removal at a really efficient rate. The rest of the deck, you have a bunch of Soldiers that get efficiencies, so Recruitment Officer gets you card advantage, Yodian Frontliner gives you pump and can be unearthed for 1 mana with haste. Guardian of New Benalia can be used to have an indestructible threat that allows you to also tap your non-attacking creatures to get an attack boost as well as some card filtering. Thalia for tax, Valiant Veteran as a Lord effect. Both of these can be thrown away to the Guardian of New Benalia and then get incidental value out of your graveyard as well. So you're not really losing the card in a sense, you're just kind of switching how you're using it. Brutal Cathars removal, so 8 pieces of removal in this version. the Siege Veteran as a way to put counters on your creatures, as well as like be incidental board wipe or removal insurance because you get creatures left over. Myrel as kind of the, if you don't kill this, this is going to run away with the game threat. It's like Squee, but like buffed up to like no end. And then it also prevents your opponent from casting like removal on your turn, or activate any abilities, things like that. A singular Wandering Emperor is some catch-all removal, pump, and creatures as well mixed in. And then with this mana base, you're able to play Mishra's Foundry, as well as an Aganjo in the mana base. So this one's a 65, basically 66% win rate deck. And then lastly, Azorious Control coming in. This was bumping out mono red, bumping out blue-white soldiers, as well as a couple other decks that were in like the lower 60% range. And this is a deck that's going to kind of look to loop certain removal spells. I think Croakies was the one who played this. But it's built around Mind Splice Apparatus, so this giving you a cost reduction for your spells. You're eventually able to, with the 2 copies of Devious Cover-Up, keep cycling cards through your graveyard back into your library. And you're taking advantage of X spells. So you get the cost reduction. So something like Syncopate would basically just become blue, and the number of counters that you have a Mind Splice Apparatus can be used early game, and with Mind Splice it makes it so this isn't necessarily a dead card late. March of the Otherworldly Light can then scale and target bigger things because you get the reduction. Silver Scrutiny is card draw. White Sun's Twilight is your win condition with this deck. You basically could just keep wiping the board repeatedly, and then you make your Might tokens and then kill them with Toxic. With that way, you get a shuffled back, so even if you keep board wiping, it still works in that sense. Union of the Third Path gives you card draw and some life, so it helps you in the early game just stabilize against more of the aggressive slanted decks. Depopulate as a 4-of, just an early sweeper. You don't necessarily want Farewell because you don't want to exile your artifacts. And honestly, Farewell's kind of slow in best of 1. A lot of the decks, especially if you get an early Thalia down, you need to be able to answer the board on turn 3 to 4 at the latest. A couple copies of Memory Deluge. This is kind of 2 spells in 1. So it gives you additional kind of value in that regard, especially with the discount from Mind Splice Apparatus. You have Field of Ruin that can be used if like your opponent's not really playing basics. In some of the greedier mana bases, like Esper sometimes runs no basics. You can keep putting the Field of Ruins back into your deck and then just strip mine your opponent. Some are Fiends just as card cycling late game as well. So that's it, the top 3 decks. If you're looking for the expanded scope, we did one earlier in the week. We'll also be back. Usually I do standard best of 1 on Mondays, but you can check that out as well. If you're looking for the other extended formats, definitely check that out. And I think I'm going to show one bonus deck. It's an Explorer deck, but honestly, this is the deck that I've had like the most fun playing in a while. It is an Atraxa Transmogrify deck. So the only things, you run a bunch of ways to make tokens: Careful Consideration, Fable the Mirror Breaker, Courier's Briefcase, Obnixis, like Chariot, and then you hit the Transmogrify, you always find Atraxa, and then you just refill your hand. I had games where like you draw an Obnixis off it, and then you attack your opponent with Atraxa, casualty it to Obnixis, and then instant ultimate your Obnixis to deal another 7 damage to your opponent. So kind of like pseudo Splinter Twin kind of combo. You can also reanimate your Atraxa with Liliana's Death Majesty. I have a gameplay video up on my channel if you want to see, but honestly, like, this deck was so much fun to the point where I have a lot of these cards in paper and I'm going to pick up the remaining ones. Unfortunately, this spiked like crazy in price, but I think I want this deck in paper as well for Pioneer. So that's kind of a bonus one if you're looking to do some of the Eternal formats. But there's a lot of great gameplay on the channel as well. In any case, thanks for watching. Hope you have a great one. Good luck. And for those trying to get top 1200 or top 250 Mythic, hope you get it and finish up in a top spot for the month. Thanks for watching. Have a great one.